I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. Just what do you think you're doing, Dave?
Why, you stuck-up, half-witted, scruffy-looking nerf herder.
This means something.
I am Locutus of Borg.
I must not fear, and fear is the mind killer.
Get away from her, you
Nerd! Nerd!
I'm Matt Kressel.
And I'm David Mercurio Rivera.
And
this is
Nerdcon. Welcome to episode 15 of the Nerd Count podcast. We have a very special guest today. David, would you like to introduce our guest?
Absolutely. And I can't believe we're up to 15, by the way.
I know. We had a little hiatus, but we're going strong again.
Absolutely. We have with us today a friend and author, Kate Maruyama. Kate Maruyama is the author of Alterations, The Collective, Bleak Houses, and Harrogate. Her novella, Family Solstice, was named Best Fiction Book of 2021 by Rue Morgue magazine. Her short work has appeared in numerous journals, including Asimov's and Analog. She serves on the board of directors of the Shirley Jackson Awards. She writes, teaches, cooks, and eats in Los Angeles, where she just happens to live. Welcome, Kate.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
This is great.
And I haven't seen you, David, in maybe 5-6 years since a Readercon a long time ago.
Absolutely. We have a shared history in terms of our attendance of Readercon, which is where I first met you, and it was through your mom, the legendary writer Kit Reed, that we kind of came to know you. And I have such vivid memories of your mom, Kate, I have to say. I can't believe it's been almost 8 years since she passed away.
Yeah, I'm a really lucky person. I think most people lose their folks and maybe there are a few stories, but I constantly run into new stories from people. It feels like she's still around. So any con I go to, I'm going to run into somebody who has a fabulous story about her. So it's a gift.
I also, knew your mom and I met her, Ellen Datlow on, she would always say, can I ride with you up to Readercon? Can I ride with you? And she's like, but we have to stop at the Reed's house. I'm like, okay. And then I met your mom, and then I had just been diagnosed with Crohn's, and I was like, and she emails me beforehand. She's like, is there any dietary restrictions? I'm like, well, it's, I'm not allergic, but I probably shouldn't eat nuts. And it was just like a throwaway thing. I completely forgot. I get there, she actually baked a special set of cookies without nuts for me because her, like, whatever her recipe was, it had nuts. She's like, oh, these are just for you. I'm like, oh my God, like who am I that she's doing this for me? But I remember like all these like really successful authors would come through there on their way up to Readercon, and then we just sit in the living room and chat and talk, and she was so great, and your dad was awesome. And then like every year after that, she remembered about the no nuts thing. Yeah. And it was just like, wow, like and your mom read for us multiple times at the Fantastic Fiction series, and she was a little bit older, but my God, the energy, right? Like she just was a firecracker. So I just wanted to say, and I didn't really know your dad that well. I think that he kind of stood off to the side, was a little kind of, I don't want to say shy, but just sort of let Kit do her thing when we were there. But he all my interactions with him were great. But I just want to say, like your parents were awesome people, and they raised an awesome person, and we're so happy to have you on. And when you had emailed me, you said, hey guys, any interest in a podcast? And I emailed Dave and I said, what do you think? I said, I think, of course. And he's like, what did you write? You're like, yes. Like
I said, like Meg Ryan in When Harry
Yes, that's right. Yes, and the famous Cat's Deli scene. So yes, you gave David a lot of pleasure.
Great.
And unlike Meg Ryan, he didn't fake it. Um,
Mhm.
so, no, seriously, it's awesome to have you on.
Thank you.
And
And I'm so lucky because of who my folks were. I've just met so many amazing writers. That first Readercon I went to, I had a book out, but I actually was there because my mom was guest of honor and I wanted to like fangirl for
mhm.
her. I had no idea I was meeting like colleagues, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I didn't even think of like myself as a writer at that point. I was like, this is really cool. And I met, I think, some of the people who were more deeply in my like science fiction and horror like life than I knew I would. So I was definitely a very lucky writer to grow up not only fully supported, but with a parade of amazing writers coming through the house all the time.
Mm.
Yeah. I think, that I believe that was the first time we met at
Mhm.
Readercon. I try
I
to
think
go
we
every
met
year.
in my parents' living room.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think, yeah, yeah.
So yeah, before the way up there. But ReaderCon itself, and we actually had a podcast live from ReaderCon, not this past one, but the previous one. And it's one of my favorite conventions. I think, David, it's one of your favorite conventions.
It's so intimate and intellectual. Those are two things that I like, and the
Yeah,
fact that
it's
you
a
can
very smart con.
absolutely.
Yeah.
The
Yeah, but like,
conversations are really great.
Mhm.
like you go to certain conventions, and I'm not going to name them, but some of them just feel like you have to be like on, you have to be performing, you have to be like putting on this, oh, I'm a professional and this is what I'm doing. Whereas like ReaderCon, I've always felt, especially with the areas outside and the kind of hangout areas, that it's just much more relaxed and people are just more
Hmm.
at home being themselves. And this enables you to have like really deep and interesting conversations with people about things that you really love. And like you live on the West Coast, but you tend to come out to ReaderCon I don't know regularly, but I feel like you've
It
been out there quite
was
a bit.
it was my gateway con. It was my first
Mhm.
one. So because of that guest of honor thing, and I'm really sad to have let it go the past couple of years,
Mm.
but I have a job where I teach high schoolers of California writing on a college campus for a solid month every July now. And so it seems to not be jiving with that. But I do, yeah, it's a really nice mellow vibe there, and you
Yeah.
can hang and you end up in deep conversations. And also, I've noticed there's not a I'm too fancy for you to talk to me thing that happens at other
Yeah.
cons.
Hmm.
Right.
Everybody is full of respect. For my favorite thing was I brought a writer who is not well known, who I think is a really good writer, and introduced her to a number of mom's friends who were on the famous spectrum very high.
Mhm.
Every one of them was like so supportive of her, so interested in what she had to say. A couple of them bought her book. It was really nice. It just sort of showed the sort of openness that ReaderCon has.
Yeah, like I've described it sometimes that there's no like what's the word? Like there's no like stratusphering of levels, at ReaderCon. Like
Mhm.
everyone's kind of on the same level. And even if you're a beginner, it's just you're welcome. Like, yes, you're one of us. Come. We need
Yeah.
blood, right? And then sometimes they will actually have like the blood donor truck show up. So that's always
That's right.
interesting.
Forgot about that. That's right. The
Yeah, they would
blood.
just show up. It's like, why do they come when writers are here? What's it about our blood that they desire? So you mentioned teaching.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, you're
yeah.
on. I mean, before we even get to that, I want to say you're on the West Coast, right? And
Yes.
one thing that fascinated me was learning why you went to the West Coast. I mean, you were a screenwriter at the time, or you
Oh yeah,
hoping to
I
be a
was
screenwriter?
I yeah, so I moved out here to the choice was New York or LA to work in film.
Hmm.
And I wanted to write screenplays. And my husband at the time, my boyfriend at the time, who is now my husband, he had already lived in New York, so he said LA. And I ended up here because of the film industry 33 years ago. So I now feel more Los Angeles than even East Coast. It's a
Hmm.
very comfortable space to be. And I worked in the industry for 10, 15 years, if you count what I was doing at home. And I was an executive for Sylvester Stallone.
Oh.
And it's oddly, this is what, I don't know if it's appropriate to segue here, but this is where my latest horror novel came from, because I was working for folks. There are a lot of really wonderful filmmaking people in this town. I'm definitely not, again, disparaging a whole group of people, but there was a breed of extremely powerful person or people in that stratosphere who were, I don't know, just had a sort of dubious connection with moral choices. One of my early bosses got a speeding ticket for going 80 on Sunset Boulevard and handed me the ticket with a wad of cash in an envelope and ordered me to deliver it to an address in Hollywood, which was an abandoned apartment. And I put it through a letter slot. And she never had to do traffic school or, have it on her record because she didn't have time for that.
Right.
So there were things like that. So I wrote, since we're recording this novel, The Collective, but just sort of working through all kinds of thoughts about levels of morality. I also had a close friend that I had from childhood who ended up being enormously influential and very damaging, very sort of narcissistic sociopath, and very well known. And so this is not about that person, but it's an exploration of the negative impact that a narcissistic sociopath can have on all kinds of people.
Timely. It sounds very timely. Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
I don't understand, David. What do you mean?
What do I mean? Yes, yeah. and the echoing repercussions through many people's lives. But he's a demon because it's just easier to do that.
I was going to ask if it has supernatural elements, and you just answered the question. So The Collective, this is out now, or when did it come out?
It is out now from Writ Large Press, which is a very small press doing really good things in the world. So I was really happy when Chiwon Choi, asked me if I had any books, and then was super excited about it. And they released it. So their idea of publishing is that publishing at its heart is to make public. And they actually had a project called Publish. It started in New York, and then it was in LA, where people could go by, they would have a prompt. And in the first iteration, you would type something up and they would put it on a wall and they'd say, "You are now published. It has been made public." They had iterations of this in Union Station in LA, that had the prompt, "Where are you going? Where have you been?" And people would type things up and it turned into a book that they published. Sometimes they would project things. So they are very into making community-oriented, accessible programming. And I was involved with their 90 by 90, which was 90 consecutive days of literary events in and around Los Angeles. It was unbelievable. But all were free and accessible. And so they reached out to folks all over the literary communities here and had them stand up and run nights. So I ran a horror night for that in Union Station, which was really fun. Anyway, they're now working on a project in Pittsburgh. I would just recommend looking up on the website. It's really phenomenal. It's a community boosting, giving back sort of storytelling situation. So the first iteration of this, they published it as a news and email form, and it would come to you every week because they were like, "Hey, would people read a book in episodes?" Turns out people were rather frustrated by that and wanted the whole book. And so later they published it digitally. And then this year it came out in hard, in a proper book form right here. So, and they don't care for Amazon. So you can find it through Bookshop or any local bookseller.
That's amazing. That's great. It's funny how Los Angeles seems to play a part in all of you. I'm just reading the summary of the various books that you've written. It seems that Los Angeles seems to be a very important part of the atmosphere that you create in these books. Is that, I mean, obviously that's because of your experience that you just described working as an executive, a development executive in Hollywood?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, obviously this was film industry, so it was there. I feel very Los Angeles now. My first novel was set actually in New York because that was the city I was most familiar with when I did write it. But now I feel like it's really good to sort of represent the city. I think it's been misconstrued because most impressions of it come from films that are made from a very small subsection of people, most of whom have moved from elsewhere.
Uh-huh.
I actually wrote my novella Halloween Beyond a Gentleman's Suit, which is part of a trio of novellas, because I finally saw Hocus Pocus, which I know a lot of people love. I did not care for. But there was there was a character in it who was like the kid from LA who moved to a New England town. And he's like, well, I've never really done Halloween before because I'm from LA. And it was clearly written by someone who did not grow up here. And we have an amazing Halloween situation. So I wrote my kids' Halloween and I put Easter eggs all the way through it for families. I based one character on my friend Miguel, the most outrageous Halloween haunt. And so I made him Don Roberto, the king of Halloween. Yeah, it's a whole novella that just is living in there. There's a whole plot, obviously, but I really wanted that background to be out there. So now I feel like sort of duty bound to give, and I always tell my students at Cal State LA too, I'm like, you are the stewards of life here in Los Angeles, in the real city. And you have to, it's up to you to get your stories out because people have ideas that it seems to be about swimming pools and liposuction. And I honestly, personally don't know anybody who's had plastic surgery. So we live in a very different city from what you see on the media.
Yeah,
Sure.
I just saw The Substance 2 nights ago.
Oh,
I thought of it when you mentioned cosmetic surgery and body image. It seems to appear prominently in that movie.
Yeah.
So Kate, you mentioned that teaching, and I just wanted you to talk a little bit about that. Currently, you're teaching fiction writing at Cal State, is that right?
Well, yeah, not at this very moment.
Okay.
As you know, universities are having a bit of trouble now. But yes, for the past 4 years, I've been doing that. And I teach at Antioch University, Los Angeles. I also teach a private novel class that used to be through Writing Workshops Los Angeles, but we've been together 6-7 years now. And I have students who are now getting agents and stuff. So I was thinking of your writing group and how when you're around long enough, people start to finally publish and get going places. So, yeah.
So have you had any students have their books published and then come back to you and say, you inspired me or something like that?
Yeah, I'm waiting for that. I do have students who publish short stories and stuff all the time. And it's super empowering for the Cal State LA students because sometimes that can become their launching pad for other things. And what's kind of fun is I teach at California State Summer School for the Arts in their writing department. And I have high school students who are publishing things and they're such gifted writers. So that part's really exciting too.
So tell us more about your experience. What is it like teaching fiction writing in this day and age? And you'd mentioned before as we were getting ready for this podcast, you mentioned the fact that AI is now so prevalent as a tool being used by young writers. And what's your experience been like dealing with that topic?
Yeah, so it's been an interesting ride. Fortunately, in fiction class, I actually open up saying all the things that you two have been saying about how they need to learn their own voice, about how editors really only appreciate own voice. I also tell my fiction writers that Grammarly will erase their voice. Their beautiful verbal tics and how they put things. What I'm mostly doing there is sort of rehabbing them from a lifetime of reading only one kind of writer and thinking that there is a notion of correct writing.
Yes.
And I think the notion of correct writing is what is getting people into trouble in the area of AI. So with my fiction writers, I haven't yet come across AI writing, which is really, really nice. But mostly what we're doing is generating stuff early. They're handing in journals of what they've written in class every week. And they're really into it, which is nice. So people who are just like, oh, I took it because it was an elective kind of thing, AI has not been their struggle. So I've been very lucky. And I've been able to quote Sheila from Asimov's, about how it's not good reading. And personally, when I read AI fiction, I feel very much like my dad had Alzheimer's. That's why he was a little quiet, Matt. He had it for a good 15 years there. And what it reminds me of talking to someone with Alzheimer's, where you're looking at them, they look perfectly reasonable, but you can't quite make out what they're saying. And so when I read AI produced fiction, it makes me nauseous in the same way. I'm like, there's something not right here.
There's something inhuman about it. It's the same way when you look at like an AI image, there's something off about it, the uncanny valley. And
go ahead.
No, I was going to say, like, I think it would be terrifying to be a young person today because, I watch YouTube a lot. I have a lot of subscriptions on YouTube that I watch channels. And one thing I've noticed is like not only are the number of commercials increased, but every single commercial that I'm getting, and I guess it's targeting me for some reason, is about AI. It's about Grammarly or some software. We can automate this, we can automate that, or we can do the video for you. We could do this, we could do that. And if you don't really think about it critically, you're like, oh, it's a tool, it's making my job easier. Okay. But if you do think about it critically for a second, like you said, it's, to me, they're out and out lying to people, right? Like Grammarly, like it'll improve your writing. Well, just like you said, there should not be a sense of correct writing, like a proper writing, like especially in fiction, there's like, that unique voice is something that needs to be cultivated, especially now when there's this sort of flattening of voices across the spectrum. So I'm glad you do that. Now,
but I did want to bring it to composition because that's a very different class. And I get students who, the manner in which they teach, and I have many public high school teacher friends and they're wonderful, but they do have to teach toward testing. Because and so the manner in which they teach, there's really correct and incorrect. And so I end up having to undo a lot of damage. Fortunately, there's a bit more diverse reading in school. So students are getting different voices a little bit. But they come to me in their freshman year without ever having had their work looked at critically. And also the only stuff that they get back has red marks on it for what is correct and what is incorrect. And I have to deprogram them from high school and get them. So we do a lot of handwriting, mostly because also I have learned that a lot of students have never done that. They do stuff all on the screen now. And some people's brains work better when they write by hand. So it takes care of a number of things. And we very, very slowly build an essay that is very personal to them. And so I try to teach academic writing as code switching for them. So I'm like, this is just a job you don't really understand yet. When I started at a restaurant, someone was like, go get the thing by the cage and put it in the walk-in. And I had no idea what they meant. And I said, so college is the same. Like, it's not that you're not as smart, it's that you don't speak the language of the job yet. So I try to sort of like navigate that area through them. I've had lesser incidents of people using AI to write papers because we build it in very small chunks over the course of and I try to, along the way, tell them that, because I think they also misunderstand what writing is for in college. And I said, this is the way that you process what you're learning so that when you come out in the field, you fully understand it. So if you're letting the machine make those decisions for you, you're not actually comprehending what it is that you're coming up with. So we just try to recontextualize it.
Now, I've heard people say that you never really understand something until you try to teach it. Do you feel that teaching composition, teaching writing makes you a better writer?
Oh gosh, yeah. And also it keeps me honest because I will give like really like advice to my like novel students, and then I'll go back to the page and I'm like, I have not been listening to myself,
right?
It's been a really wonderful tool, and also my students teach me so much in so many ways, and everybody has different processes, which makes it better for me to teach because there's no didactic sort of one way to get that across.
Well,
One thing I found.
One thing we love to talk about is process, the writing process of the podcast.
Yeah.
So we might as well just dive into it and just get into what is your process. First of all, do you write every day? Let's start with that basic question.
Yeah, no, my mom was a very 2 pages every day or 2 hours, whichever comes second kind of person.
Mhm.
I've always had like a number of jobs, and for a while there I had kids. So I try to sit down 3 times a week for 3 hours.
Oh, wow.
And whatever gets done is correct. But I've noticed that process changes for me all the time during lockdown. I think you all had this. We were talking about this, Matt, on our prior conversation. Like we were dealing with crisis brain, and so we couldn't really go as deep.
Right.
And I managed to chip away at short stories during that time. Yeah, I'm a gardener, which is George R. R. Martin's much nicer word than pantser. I'm from Connecticut, so I always hear pants.
Pants.
Yeah, I'm not a fan. The best advice I got from a mentor, Robert Berge, was if you show up every day and work hard enough and listen, the story will make itself apparent to you. So I'm sort of in that belief about what's coming out.
Yeah, there's also that Stephen King Fawcett method that he talks about and on writing, where he's like, some days there'll be a drip and some days there'll be a flow, but if you never show up, you're not going to get any water, right? So you have to be there, you have to show up so that when it does flow, it really comes out.
And it's like any practice, if you don't do yoga for a number of weeks and you go back to it, it's really, really hard. It's the same with writing.
Now, you were talking about crisis brain. Do you feel like, I know some of us on this podcast have spoken about, the current situation we're in the United States. Obviously, there's a lot of political tensions that we won't get into. Do you find at all that this affects your writing? Do you struggle at all with that in any way?
Deeply, but I'm also realizing that we're going to have to survive a number of years here. And so now I'm using my compartmentalizing brain, which was something that I accessed once I had kids and my folks were very ill. Like you show up for the thing. So I've gotten better at that. And also what's really helped is I've started volunteering once a week because I'm underemployed as an instructor now. And I'm like, I can absolutely go down and observe court hearings in immigration court. I can absolutely go sit in a bond office and pay someone's bond to get them out of incarceration. And these are people who have done no crime. They've been paying taxes for years and years. They just happen to be gathered up. So that has helped a little bit because at least I know I am not feeling, I think what I was feeling in June, especially in LA, where the raids started every day, was just helplessness and franticness. And it was a very hard space to write from. Now I'm starting to be like, okay, here we are, what can we do? Kind of thing.
Right.
I mean, I think it's important as artists to continue to create art even in difficult times, because not only is it kind of a lifeline for us, but it can also be helpful to other people, I think.
Well, and also if art were to stop now, then certain forces would have won. And,
yeah, exactly.
We need art to keep going. So absolutely. And I try to honor that writing time and really understand that that's a really important part of survival.
Right.
You mentioned earlier that we spoke about Readercon, and one of the great things about Readercon, of course, is the Shirley Jackson Awards. And you have been a past juror.
Twice.
Oh no, you've been twice for the Shirley Jackson, and you've also been a juror for the Bram Stoker Awards. Is that right? So what was that like?
Well, the Jacksons we called it Hardcore Reading Club when we were in there. I was in there with Chikotile Malamaru and Gabino Iglesias, and it it was such a brilliant education, because I was judging novel and novella, and I'm not exaggerating, about 200 novels in a big stack.
Yikes.
And I was reading some of the best stuff around. I feel like my writing definitely got better that year. So I highly recommend that people jury for books, for sure.
I always wonder about that because, I'm a decent reader, like in terms of speed, but I don't know, like 200 books, like at what point do you like be like, okay, this isn't working, I'm moving to the next book? Like how did you read them all to the end?
A lot of that ends up being, I think we're not allowed to talk about this, but I can speak vaguely enough. A lot of that ends up being about, is it appropriate for the award? And so there are a lot of no's there.
Right.
And then there, are other things. And so the ones that are really good kind of stand out within a certain amount of reading. And those are the ones that you sort of focus on. So it was really great, and it did force me to read more books than in their entirety than I am accustomed to, and seeing how they're structured. And I mean, it's really wonderful. There's such a variety of different kinds of novels out there, so that was very emboldening. And also, you'll read things that are emboldening because you're like, oh, I'm a pretty good writer. So I don't know, it's really good to read widely if you have the time and space for that. So it was an excellent, super fun thing to do. I did feel despair when 10 more books would show up on my front doorstep. And we do read in a number of categories, so that was exhausting, but we really did like go through them all for sure.
Wow. So Kate, you have a did Matt just freeze? Oh no. You you have a new book out. It's not speculative fiction, but it's a book called Alterations. So maybe you can speak a little bit about that book.
Yeah, it is completely wild. I wrote Harrogate, which I thought was a love story, and it turned out to be horror because one of them is dead. And there's kind of a doula demon. And then the next book I wrote, my friend Tony Ann Johnson said, why are you not writing about old movies? My dad, Joe Reed, founded the film department at Wesleyan University with John Fraser. And so I grew up, and it ages me, before VHS. And my dad would get movies for class, and he on 16 millimeter, and he'd screen them in our living room. So I grew up on movies of the 30s and 40s. So I've always loved that. And so I started writing toward that, and I ended up with a family drama. And now I can hold up, the book is Alterations. It's a beautiful cover. And what's funny is people look at it and think it's horror. And that's been part of the problem of being a horror writer coming out with this, because it's a little haunting. So it's a story of Adriana, who is a seamstress for Edith Head, who was running the costume department of Paramount in the 1930s, and she falls in love with and moves in with a woman, Rose, and they live in a Boston marriage where people don't ask questions and you're totally fine because they call you roommates, until sort of life starts to seep in, and she makes decisions that have repercussions through 3 generations of her family. So half of the story is told, it goes back and forth in 1939 to 1942 Los Angeles. And then the other half is in 1990s Baltimore. Interesting.
How do you deal with multiple points of view? And do you have a favorite point of view? Like, I have a preference for first person, I find. Do you have a preference, perhaps a point of view? And also, when you write a novel, I've often seen folks skipping from character to character, like George R. R. Martin will do that chapter to chapter. Is that something that you do, or this is more about process, but what's your feeling on point of view?
Yeah, I love multiple point of views. It's not something I usually make a decision on right away. This one, I felt those points of view from early on, and I got 35 pages in, and then it all went to hell. I had no idea what I was doing. So it's it's a gardener and pantsing and cobbling situation. It is really hard. This novel took me 3 years to get to draft, and then another couple of years of another solid year and a half of just revising. But it was, and also like one of the voices was in. I realize I'm running out of battery, so I'm moving. This is moving conversation. one of
You're like the YouTubers that like walk and talk very
Right.
seriously, like with
I have a nice
authority.
background. Here's one of my dad's paintings.
Oh, I
Nice.
think I remember that one. Was that in the house?
There was another version of this. Actually, my sister-in-law has,
Okay.
but my dad painted it for me, and it's all of it's from movie stars.
Wow.
For those
So-
listening, can you describe it?
Yes, so it is an alphabet of squares, and there's also an ampersand and a paragraph start, and it's got paintings of movie stars that go with the letters. So you're looking
Is it
at
their
like
first
Elizabeth
initial
Taylor.
or something? Is it
Yeah,
their like yeah?
sometimes there's Francis X. Bushman is always the X if he's doing movie stars because it was the
Okay.
only X he could find. And Vivian Lee was V for Vivian, but some of them, Elizabeth Taylor, it's T for Taylor. So yeah. Anyway.
Going back
but-
to the writing process. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. So points of view. I was writing one character, and I don't know when I'm writing a character if it's going to be first person or third. And I went back and forth for a while until the voice took hold.
Right.
And it takes me a while to get it voice. And once the voice took hold, I knew it was third person. I always knew Lizzie is a 13-year-old character, and she just came to me in first. And then Adriana there's something about when you do period, when you do 1930s, I feel like if I did first person, I would somehow ruin the voice because I have so many contemporary
Right.
leanings,
yeah,
but
yeah.
third past really worked for her. And so you could tell she had a different voice. And so what I ended up doing was writing the back in time one, the voice that was strongest to me all the way through, picking away at the other 2 points of view. And then once I wrote the back in time voice, I realized it was a romantic, spoiler, tragedy. And so I turned the contemporary 29-year-old into a romantic comedy arc.
Okay.
And then Lizzie, I was just actually lucky at the time to have an agent who said, "Why is Lizzie telling this story?" And that just brought it all together for me. So a lot of it was index carding, rearranging, cutting. I cut like 100 pages. I ended up adding 60.
Oh,
A
wow.
lot of it was in the editorial.
Wow. This was inspired by somebody in your family. I think I heard you mention in a different interview.
Yeah. So my mom's great aunt, Ruth, actually, which was her father's aunt, lived in a Boston marriage in the early teens and 20s. She was an incredible woman, and she lived with Mary. That's not a romantic tragedy. She lived with Mary until Mary passed in like the 1950s. And my grandfather, even though they were in a very conservative family in Jacksonville, Florida, would go around and do errands and things for them. So she was incredible. She was also one of the first women reporters in the South.
Wow.
I think I found her story very consoling in these times, because I'm like, if she can be gay, live with her partner, and work a job as a woman in the 20s, that's pretty incredible in the South.
Incredible. Wow.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
She was a reporter like your mom. Your mom was a reporter as well, right?
Yeah, I didn't realize. Yeah, it went back so far. And actually, her typewriter, Aunt Ruth's typewriter, my mom wrote her first novel on, and then she gave it to me. And when I was 15, I banged out my first novel on it.
Oh, wow.
So
Yeah.
I have two questions for you because
Okay.
you have this literary novel Alterations, and then you have a horror The Collective, and then you also have
and they came out
novellas.
the same month.
And then you have Bleak Houses. So I guess like my first question is this. Like how do you decide to say, okay, I'm gonna write like a straight up literary novel or I'm gonna write a horror thing? Like is it just that the idea just comes to you and you're like, I have to write this, or is it more premeditated? That's my first question. So I'll start there because I have a feeling the
Okay.
answer is going to be a little long. So
Yeah. So I don't know what I'm writing when I sit down. Like I said,
mhm.
Harrogate, I thought was, straight up love story. Turns out it was horror. I also sat down to write a novel of a portrait of a marriage told through the lens of Alzheimer's that was 100% going to be genre. And I was going to be using this alternate space and all this other stuff. But then once I started getting into the characters and things, it was apparently realism. So I don't know what it is when I set out to do it. When I do short stories, I have decided just not to do non-genre because it doesn't pay.
Mm.
So my stories that are in Asimov's are actually realism. They're just set in a near future where we're sending colonies to Mars and how that's affecting families. It's so
Yeah.
when I have one coming out in analog this November, December, which took me 2.5 years to write, and it's about living as a caretaker to someone with Alzheimer's, and sort of how I sort of wanted to access those feelings of what it feels like when the person who's always looked after you and you've always counted on really needs your care.
Yeah.
And sort of that I wanted to allow caretakers to feel seen in not being okay with that sometimes,
Yeah.
So
And you mentioned, first of all, I feel like that's another power of fiction, is that we can take these things that we've personally experienced and craft a story around them, and then like others can sympathize with us, but also, like you said, they can feel seen. They can feel like, oh yeah, I've gone through this too. I'm not alone. And I think that's a powerful thing, that we're able to do that with just words on a page, right? So I think you mentioned earlier, and uh, correct me if I misheard, but then you were like 25, 35 pages into one of these novels and you realized it wasn't working. So like
yeah.
my question is, like, how do you deal with that? Okay, so like first of all, just this sense that we can actually see it's not working, like that we can see it, I think is a skill that takes time to develop, right? To see that your own work isn't working. But once you see it, it's like, okay, well, how do I fix this? So I guess my question is, like, what are some strategies that you might use for this? And this is a selfish question because I am in a similar situation right now. I'm about 25,000 words into a book and I'm sort of like, oh, I feel like I've run off a cliff. But
Yeah, I was lucky. I did write that novel when I was 15, but a lot of my writing training was in screenplays because I was throwing myself at that brick wall in the 90s when actually girls weren't selling screenplays, but I wasn't paying attention to that like a fool. Um, and in screenplays, I learned to think of everything in scenes, and you can move things around. And actually, I worked on the worst horror movie ever made, Maxim Zool, as an assistant editor. Adam West was the star, with an editor who had these very dead scenes that she had to kind of bring life to. And she learned how to if you put one scene before another, it imbues the scene that follows with different meaning. So always when I'm writing, I realize that I'm just it's like Lego blocks, each scene is a Lego block and everything is movable. And yeah, there is that sweater effect that if you start to pull at one thread, it affects everything. But I'm a much happier rewriter than a drafter. And so drafting, getting to that page 35, I was like, this will be the most beautiful book ever. And then I was like, what next? And I think just showing up and creating more scenes. That book I told you, The Marriage Told Through the Lens of Alzheimer's, I actually wrote, that was a really difficult thing to write. I have trouble writing around very personal stuff. But I would actually write that during my novel class because I would give people a 15-minute prompt and I would aim whatever that prompt was. And my prompts are very vague. They're like a rope about to snap. They're not like you're in a room with a gun and 5 people on the floor. They're very vague. I would aim those at the family and just keep chipping away at it. So sometimes I'll use prompts that way. And as long as I'm writing for 15 minutes, I create a new scene. And then the scenes I can put together and see what sort of meaning they have. And granted, you have to write in a lot of connective tissue, but that's sort of my process. I mean, if I sat down and I was like, I am creating a novel today, I'd have a nervous breakdown. But I'm going to write a scene in which these characters do something.
I like that too. And you mentioned that one of the stories that you have coming out, I think you said Analog, took you several years to write. Is that right? So like one of the things that I've noticed today, especially with like the quote algorithm, capital A, is this pressure to produce content, this pressure to constantly like be churning out stuff, one thing after another, after another, after another. And, you know, I've been trying to actively resist that because I feel like to make really good, high quality art, to move away from mediocrity, not that necessarily things are coming out every day or frequently are mediocre, but I feel like if you spend the time with something, the time that it takes and not rush it and sit with it and perfect it, go back to it, rehash it, put it away for a little bit, come back, see it fresh. You can make something really, really beautiful that wouldn't have existed had you just like knocked it out in a week or NaNoWriMo, knock out a novel in 30 days. Not that you can't do something beautiful in that time, but I just feel like we're like society or the algorithm or whatever technology is pushing us toward like rapidity. And I think like for me, it becomes healthy to actively resist that. How do you feel about it?
Totally agree. I had someone who published a novel that came out of a class of mine. Oh, so there was one. That was a different class. And they were like, well, I need to do something next year because they were trying to find the Stephen Graham Jones model of just doing one thing a year, which apparently was the Stephen King model. But I also knew, I think Stephen Graham Jones, that's just his rhythm. He can't stop writing. And his, that's sort of like how it flows and it's working for him. But I definitely need to know that it's the best version of itself that it can be. And so for this story, I was, I felt like a lot of an emotional weight to make sure I got it right and make sure that I wasn't discounting people or doing a disservice to people in any sort of angle of dealing with Alzheimer's. And it took me a while, and I ended up bringing in a very small point of view of the mom, Zania, who suffers from Alzheimer's and sort of how they're seeing things. Because I did a lot. I think with writers have a lot of theory of mind. We do that all day. What are they thinking? How are they feeling? Because it's natural. And I did a lot of that in caretaking my folks. So I just knew it needed to be right. And I wasn't in a super rush for that one. But I do think we have this capitalist notion of product that's not good for writing, for sure.
But my problem tends to be the opposite one than the one Matt just described, which is that I will put it away and I'll go back and revisit it and refine it and craft it and go back. But then I'll put it away again and keep doing that. And it's very hard for me sometimes to just convince myself that it is as good as it's going to get and to let go of it. I don't know if it's a defense mechanism. It won't be, you can't get rejected if you never send it out, right?
I have a joke in our writers group that we never see a David original. We always see a David rewrite. I'm like, like it's always
there must have been an original at one point.
There must have been an original at some point, but we've only ever seen this story rewritten.
I remember being in my last year of grad school, and because I got an MFA so that I could teach, and being like, why is everybody published and I'm not? And it's like, oh, you actually have to send stuff out for that to happen.
Right. It's
funny how our brains can get in there, right?
Yeah. Well, do you work on multiple projects at once?
I do. I used to think I was like cheating on my novel with a short story. But it helps me clear, especially novels. Sometimes you really do have to walk away. And if I'm working on a completely different short story, I'll uh solve some problems in the back of my head. I think a lot
Mm,
of our writing takes place in the back of our head while we're doing other things.
yeah.
And so I will go back and forth. And now I'm doing a project with my friend LP Kindred, who's an Ignite award-winning short story writer. We're writing a book about how to write genre novellas because we are both big fans. I have a novella habit. I've written like five now because they're so tidy and conquerable. When you
Yeah.
rewrite a novel, it's very, very, deep. And so he's writing, so we're both going meta on this. So right now I'm working on a novella that's part of the science fiction collection that I'm slowly assembling through what I published with Asimov's and Analog, um, and writing about the process of writing. And
Mm,
it's called Room for Magic because um, the most craft books tend to be a bit prescriptive.
mm.
And we want to just create an open conversation about the variety of novellas that are out there. There isn't actually one structure for a novella. There are many beautiful ways in which it can manifest, and sort of to get inside that process. So we're working on that. So I'm going back and forth between those now. But then again, I have a horror novel that I have to keep poking with a stick, just make sure it's alive.
Yeah, it's funny. We have a member of our writers group who procrastinated on writing her novel by writing another novel, which is, I'd love to procrastinate in that manner, but very
I have
interesting.
a friend who's writing the most beautiful novel ever written, which I hope will be out there at some point because he wrote a whole book about not being able to write this most beautiful novel that was ever written,
That's great.
which
Meta.
got published.
Very meta.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So our last guest that was on, Shiva Kumar, uh, there was some overlap in the sense that he was an actor and he's been on a lot of TV and he's also directed um and he's written screenplays. Like, do you find that there's a lot of overlap, or like, I guess, you know, from your work in the quote Hollywood area to the fiction writing, like, do you find that it helps, that it hurts? Like, is there overlap there?
It really helps because in screenwriting, the notes you get are not like in a soft, comfy fiction workshop. I got very good at rewriting and not being emotional about cutting stuff.
Hmm.
And I got very good at seeing a structure after I'd gotten to draft. And then that scenes thing that I talked about earlier. So that part was incredibly useful. I will say that Harrogate, which is my first published book, not the first one I wrote, um, ended up being a three-act structure. So I think I was on it a little more, but the subsequent books since have, and also my novella family Solstice is definitely three-act structure. It's told in four seasons, but the last season's only a page and a half. Um, so, but I think seeing that structure helped me learn different structures as I went on. And also I think using a critical brain on other people's screenplays for a solid 10, 15 years was incredibly valuable.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, I mean, I have never written a screenplay, and I've read them, but I've never like critiqued them. But David and I obviously are in the same writing group, and we've critiqued hundreds, maybe thousands of stories. And I definitely feel that looking at other people's work critically and seeing how it works and how it doesn't work, can be really helpful in my own work. And when I first started, I heard the expression "kill your darlings," and I thought that meant kill your characters, like make them suffer. And then
Yeah.
and then I was like, oh no, that they're talking about like don't be precious about your work, about editing, like about getting rid of that paragraph or that chapter that you love, but it's not serving the story. Then you need to throw it on the cutting room floor, right? So I mean, I think like you were saying, that maybe from the other side of it, that you learned how to do that. right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and I mean, I learned, like, if I put a book down for if I completed a draft, I usually put it down and send it out to beta readers for a month or so. When I sit down to it again, I can look at it as something I've received as an editor
Yeah.
in a way. And so that helps, that disconnect really helps. I did hear a lecture in grad school that it's about myelin on your synapses, and apparently, or synapses, apparently the deep writing, drafting is one thing, but the deep practice of writing is in editing and using that critical brain. And so supposedly that boosts the myelin on your synapses and makes you a stronger writer. I don't know. I love theories, and I know people put them in for lectures. I'm not sure if it's true, but I've sort of like lived by that a bit.
It sounds cool. I mean, one thing that I try to actively cultivate when I write is a flow state. And I think that
And
from prac
telling your inside editor to take a back seat while you're drafting is really
yeah,
important.
like I think that's facilitating that flow state, and you know, it takes a lot of practice to get to that point where you can get into that flow state very quickly. Um, but you know, then like I think if, like you were saying, it's a very different, at least for me, a very different mental state from the actual like first draft to the editing draft. And I love both
Mm.
aspects of it, but I feel like I'm using different parts of my, like I'm much more conscious in the editing stage than I am in the
Yeah, I
the
love the
first.
editing stage. I love editing my work.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's like a delight, and you can move things around, and you're kind of master of that universe. And yeah, I really enjoy it a lot, which a lot of people don't, which is really interesting too.
Hmm.
But yeah, composing gives me the screaming memes. You do have sometimes a feeling, if I go down this path, will I ruin everything? You know. So the way that I sit down to write, to keep drafting is, this stinks, but I can take it out later, and just keep saying that to yourself, and then you can get to, where you're going.
Yeah. When you transition from screenwriter to author, did you have trouble with interiority of your character? Somebody, our previous guest
View
talked
was
talked about
something,
that issue.
yeah, point of view is something I did not understand at all.
Hmm.
I had a good interiority, and I went all the way in with I guess they call it the apprenticeship novel,
Hmm.
the novel that didn't get anywhere. But then when I went
Wait,
to
there's
grad
only
school,
one? Someone didn't tell me there's only one apprentice.
right? Well, I know, well, actually two, if you count the dramatic Deja Vu, which was the title of the book I wrote when I was 15. But yeah, so they didn't teach point of view in grad school. So I was sort of like
Mhm.
self-taught on that, because coming from screenplay, you're camera view. But the idea of narrative distance and stuff was something I had to really study on my own for sure. And once I could identify it, it was easier to like sort of see and access. But when I was writing Harrogate, which is my first novel after that, I basically got inside the character's body like it was a mech suit and moved around the world, because I was not used to being in bodies at all. And as a result, it's a really claustrophobic book, which kind of works for the tension in it. But I knew that I was learning,
Right.
So tell us about your double novella, Bleak Houses. It has two books in there, Safer and Family Solstice. You want to tell us a little bit about each?
Yeah, so Family Solstice came about because my parents' house had some pipes break in it right before I
Mm.
sold it, and it was completely destroyed, which
Oh.
was
Mm.
only a couple months after I lost my mom. So it was a huge thing. So I'd been trying to work toward that, writing, and anytime I came up with something, it was too close to home and it was too hard.
Mm.
So when for a while there, Ellen Datlow and my friend Lisa Morton were proposing a collection called Winter Solstice.
Hmm.
And so I was writing that, and it came out as a short story, and I set it in the house I grew up in. And then that sort of took legs. And I just borrowed the objects and stuff. And the family is sort of a colonizer family. I put in some things tone deaf colonists would have around their house, which was definitely not in my real house. But I was able to sort of celebrate the house and get into the love of the house, but then make it hella creepy and put something terrible in the basement. And then I published it with Kate Jones at Omnium Gatherum, she folded her press, and I was talking to just friends at Raw Dog Screaming, and they said they were going to look at some of her orphaned stuff. And I got in this conversation with Jennifer Barnes all about novellas and how much I love that form. And she was talking about creating a novella line. And it was just kismet. And she said, do you have another? And I said, yes, I do, because I had a novella habit. And that was Safer, which is set during lockdown in Los Angeles, where an au pair goes to work for an A-list actor, and things get really creepy. Because it was so strange in Los Angeles. Every city you're in, like lockdown was a really specific time. So it was a time people could get away with things. So I explored that. And I was really lucky. They made it the first book in their novella line with 2 novellas in it.
It's a great book. And I think you signed it for me. You were mentioning just like how weird lockdown was, and I host the Fantastic Fiction at KGB series. David's co-hosted with me a number of times. And I remember I actually helped Ellen Datlow move apartments during the lockdown. And I was just like, oh, I'm going to just go walk down that area by the bar, the KGB bar, and have a look around. And do you want to know that I didn't even recognize it? I walked through, everything was shuttered, everything was quiet, no one was on the street. Well, I should say that there were a lot of, unfortunately, homeless people on the street at the time, but like no pedestrians. And it was just like, I was like, where am I? Like the world had changed, and it was such a surreal, strange experience. And I think that your novella actually captured quite a bit of that. So
I knew it was a singular time, and I really
Yeah.
wanted to capture it because where sadly it feels a little like lockdown now, because a lot of people are afraid to go out because of the raids. So we have neighborhoods that are feeling like lockdown in LA, which is wild. But yeah, I knew, and everything got clean, and we met during that time. We had that conversation that folks can find about writing hope in times of trouble, which was during that time when bioluminescence was coming back and the air was so clean. And yeah, it was a real trip.
Right. Yes, that's right. And yeah, that was a lot.
And here we are.
And here we are.
Crazy times. We're actually at the hour mark, but before we wrapped up, I felt like we didn't follow up on something you mentioned earlier, which was that you worked for Sylvester Stallone.
Yeah.
Can you describe a little bit about
You
that?
don't got to talk about that, none.
The listeners are going to want to know about this. I mean, what is he like, and did you interact with him a lot, and what were you doing?
Yeah, I would like the listeners who are fans to be able to remain that way. I was doing development. I was going to lunches and saying, "So you got any scripts for Sly?" So it was an interesting time. He was aiming to be a producer. And I had a wonderful woman boss, Kimberly Beebe, who's now de Bonaventura, who we were going into meetings with the studio and helping writers work through scripts and things. So it was an excellent time to be working. And as to what's he's like, I would leave that to, even though my non-disclosure of 20 years has gone the way of the dodo, I will let folks just decide what they think he's like.
Very good. Very fair enough. Okay. All right.
Yeah. Are there any celebrities that you worked with that were absolutely a pleasure to work with? Just curious.
Yeah, I was mostly working with writers. So there were people I knew to be kind. I think what's funny is when you work for talent, you end up being kind of like, about actors. So I definitely came up against a lot of people. But I don't think there's anybody I can pull from that pool that I was like, this is, and I'm not saying they're all terrible. I was just saying my interaction.
They're all awful.
Writers and directors were wonderful. John Woo was an excellent, kind human being who signed a poster for me and my husband. My friend worked for him for our wedding, and he got the Mandarin wrong, so we crossed it out and started over again, and we have both posters now. So
Okay.
he was definitely a kind human, and Chow Yun-fat was also incredibly kind.
Nice.
Awesome. Well, I think that just about wraps it up for us. And I think Kate, that we have our sign off where we like to count down from 3 to 1 and say farewell nerds and draw out nerds. So if you will join us. Are you ready, Dave? Are you ready, Kate?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1.
Farewell,
nerds. All right,
It's never
it's as good as it's gonna get, right? We'll fix it in post, as they say.
Yeah.
All right, Kate, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for
really
coming
has
on.
been.
And
Thanks so much. It was so nice hanging out with you both.
Absolutely, and we'll see you in the next podcast. All right.
Or Readercon.
Yes.
All right. Take care.
You've been listening to the Nerd Count Podcast. That's our show. But if you want more shows, check us out at nerdcountpodcast.com or your favorite podcasting site. See you next time.
Get those nerds!